I realized that modern music, 21st century music in particular, deals with the African diaspora.
Right.
So the African diaspora culture is now global. Literally
Yeah.
everywhere you go, it's
Mm-hmm.
like whether you listen to trap, hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
jazz, pop, it
Afrobeat.
all came Afrobeat. Exactly. It
Yeah.
all, the roots is
Yeah.
Africa via the Caribbean.
Welcome to Keep Taking Ground, the Saxophone podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Ryan, and today's guest is one of my favorite alto saxophonists. He was born in Harlem, New York, and began playing the saxophone at an early age. He grew up in between Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Port-au-Prince, Haiti. He was a finalist in the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz saxophone competition in 2013. He's a graduate of Fwe Culture of Music and the prestigious Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz Performance. He's performed with the likes of Herbie Hancock, Clark Terry, Ron Carter, Jack DeJohnette, Jimmy Heath, Babyface, Tony Braxton, Wynton Marsalis. The list goes on and on and on. Godwin Louis, welcome to the podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here with me today. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Good to be here. Congratulations on your podcast. This is a wonderful project. I can't wait to hear and learn from some of the other guests. And I'm honored to be a part of this new podcast.
Man, and the honor is really all mine. I've been following you for over a decade now. We originally met, I believe, in 2007, believe it or not.
Yes, we did. I remember perfectly. I have a
In
good memories
Trinidad.
of this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I saw you. You came to Trinidad to perform with the Berkeley College of Music Ensemble, right?
That is correct. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a band that Ron Reed put together.
Right.
The
Yeah.
great Ron Reed. Shout out
Mm-hmm.
to him. You know.
Yeah. Um, and so I remember being totally blown away by your playing. I didn't know much about jazz and the music, even though I knew that I wanted to study jazz. And I
Mhm.
specifically remember talking to you after one of the performances you guys did. And I think
Mhm.
I had already applied to Berkeley, and I was accepted. And
Mhm.
I wanted to make sure I was prepared. And
Right.
so I remember asking you, okay, what do I need to know? Like, and this, you started to talk about some, what I know now to be like very foundational ideas around jazz harmony. And
Mhm.
I was totally clueless
Oh wow.
at that point. So
Wow.
it's been a long journey for me, and it's been a pleasure to be inspired and to look at what you're doing along the way. I'd like to get into how you started to play the saxophone a little bit. So what was that like?
Right. So in 1994,
Mm-hmm.
my Haitian parents,
Mm-hmm.
my father was a pastor, and
Mm-hmm.
both of my parents are in the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
He passed away last year, bless his
Okay.
soul. He decided, gonna move from Connecticut to Haiti,
Mm-hmm.
and I always wanted to play the saxophone. And before that, at the age of 5, we all start. Our fifth birthday gift is the piano. You get
Wow.
your first lesson at the piano. And so I've been playing the saxophone for 2 years. I have an older brother that's 2 years older than me. He was already, like, to me at the time, a
Yeah.
pro. It was like
Mm-hmm.
playing in church, can sight read anything. And I
Whoa.
always felt like,
But
you know,
he had to be 7 at that point.
yeah, he was 7 at that point. He can
That's
sight
crazy.
read, like, anything. Was
Mm-hmm.
classically trained, can hear everything. Because my father was a big fan of ear training. So
Mm.
growing up, solfege was all around the house, you know. And
Was he a musician?
yeah, he was a musician,
Okay.
pastor, professor, yeah, all of the
Oh,
above.
wow.
Yeah, really into harmony, into composition.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so he was, you know, very, very, very heavy
Hmm.
cat, as we
Yeah,
say.
yeah,
So I always wanted to play the saxophone. I think the first time I saw the saxophone was there was a little kid show. I don't know if you ever saw it called Barney.
Of course.
It
I
was
grew up on
here, yeah.
Bonnie.
So yeah, so and I saw the saxophone, one of the characters playing the
Yep,
saxophone.
yep.
So I always wanted to play it. And then when we moved to Haiti, you know, it was so different for us, the
Yeah.
culture, everything. And
Hmm.
I was sort of like sad. I miss my friends here in the States.
Hmm.
Father said, you know what? We're gonna get you saxophone lessons.
Hmm.
So
That
yeah,
was the
my first
trade-off.
that was a trade-off. So he hired one of his best friends, this maestro by the name of Luc Nerchon. He was like he was sort of like the main guy in that region where we were in
Yeah.
Carrefour,
Hmm.
a commune in Port-au-Prince.
Okay.
He played for, you know, the National Guards
Hmm.
Orchestra, you know, in the Caribbean. That's like
That's, yeah.
creme of the cream, you know, creme de
Yep.
la creme, as we say.
Hmm.
And so this guy was an amazing sight reader too.
Wow.
And so he hired him to teach me my first saxophone lesson. So I remember vividly my very first lesson was Mary had a little, and he said, "This is a saxophone. This is how you produce the sound. So you just roll your bottom lip,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then you roll your upper lip. Notice
Yeah.
that we call this a
So,
French embouchure here.
yeah, French school.
No
Wow.
teeth on top.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I was like, you just roll your upper lip, and then you
Hmm.
just go like you have a piece of sugar cane in your mouth. That's the way it should be
Yeah.
hitting the
Yeah.
reed. You
Yeah.
know, so that's how I learned. So started with a French embouchure,
Hmm.
and my first lesson, I was able to produce a sound. My
Hmm.
first lesson was Mary Had a Little Lamb, but you
Hmm.
know, starting with D. So D, D, C, B, C, D, 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 C, 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 D, D, D. You know, like pretty much diatonic. And
Phrygian Mary had a little lamb.
exactly. And then my second lesson was like the following week,
Okay.
and I think he was trying to teach me another song, and I just said, "Maestro," because that's how you refer to all those guys. I said,
Hmm.
"Maestro, please, I just wanna just teach me all the chromatic scales. Like I've been playing piano for 2 years already. I know how to
Hmm.
read. You know, I'm on. Just teach me the chromatic scale, and I'll be okay." And I think he didn't like that because you know it's Haiti, you know it's
Hmm.
poor country, and he wanted
Hmm.
his weekly income.
Right.
And
Right.
because he was such a great friend of my father, and you know, my father trusted him, he said, "Okay, fine, I'll teach you the chromatic scale." So
Hmm.
the whole lesson was spent teaching me, you know, starting from like the low B flat. I think we
Hmm.
went up to like high F, and he showed me like the front
In
and
your
the
second week
side.
of
My
lessons.
second week of lessons, yeah, he taught me all the notes,
But you know,
and
that's so like indicative of the French school of saxophone, in terms of starting at the very lowest note and just getting into those fundamental things from
yeah,
very, very
exactly.
early. Yeah.
Right, right. So we started from there, and after that, I messed around with with those notes, and I think it was like maybe the third time or the third week, my
Hmm.
father bought a saxophone from him,
Nice.
which was a C melody saxophone, which I still own to this day. I
Wow.
should post it online one of these days. You know, it's a beautiful horn. It doesn't work at all. I
Okay.
was trying to restore it, but you know the guys wanted so much money.
Right. Yeah, that must
I
be
believe it's
expensive.
a King C melody.
Okay.
And so the third week, I think he just came just to hang out, and you know, just to make sure I could play the horn.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
wasn't in the best condition, you know, so we just noodle around. And then from there, I started playing tunes, sight read some tunes with my brother.
Because at that point you
And
knew all the fingerings.
yeah, I knew all the fingerings, and I already knew how to read music, you
Right.
know. So it was just
Right.
kind of like applying. What's B flat again? Like, okay, that's B flat. Okay, cool. And then I remember trying to play, all the scales in all 12 keys, that kind of thing. And so I started playing saxophone in October. By January, I was playing in church, with my brother all over the island. And by the next summer, I was like in a band and like one of those concert bands,
Nice.
and we were gigging all over the
Wow.
island. I was like 10, so that was amazing. And then the following year, I moved back to the States
Okay.
and to Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I remember I didn't have a saxophone. I left my saxophone in Haiti.
Oh, okay.
And one of my uncle, who's the uncle that introduced me to saxophone, his name is Robert St. Fleur. And he's an amazing guitarist. He introduced me to Charlie Parker, and he said, "No, if you go to your school, because the public schools in the States, you could get a saxophone." I'm not sure if that's still the case now, but that was the deal then. So I went to school, and I went to the band instructor, Mr. DeGros, and I said, "I'm a sax player, but I don't have a horn. I'd love to join the band." And so he gave me a saxophone, and then my uncle started, teaching me jazz. He said, "Man, if you
Nice.
need to learn anything, you need to know Charlie Parker." So the very first Charlie Parker I heard was Bird playing White Christmas. Should he be here? I thought that was like the hippest thing, as we
Yeah.
say,
Yeah, yeah,
musicians, that
yeah.
I've ever heard in my life, because it reminded me of like the church sensibility and some sensibilities with the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
blues
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
this notion of like improvising not close to the melody. See, because when we grew up in church, when we improvise, it's always like we play around
Yeah,
with the
yeah, yeah.
melody. So Charlie Parker was sort of like the first that I heard that's able to use all these devices back then. At least that's what I thought. Man, why is he doing it? Sounds so cool, but it's
Yeah.
not the melody, but it's kind of like right in the pocket.
Wow.
And so so I started learning bird solos, and so we got really into bebop, and that was my foundation. So that's sort of
Amazing.
how it all started.
So let's fast forward to studying at Berklee College of Music and the Monk School. What were those experiences like?
Those experiences were amazing. But I think that the reason why they were both amazing and smooth for the most part was because I had a lot of amazing mentors around the way. Like my junior year in high school, I met this amazing instructor, this amazing fella, man, tenor saxophone player, still my favorite tenor sound by the name
Wow.
of Herb Wilson. So I was attending a church, Walter Amy Zion, that a church I was playing every Sunday. They decided to pay for our lessons. So that's when I got my formal lesson at the age of 16, like 15 going on 16, something like that. So I was able to study with Mr. Wilson for 2 years, and I felt like he prepared me. You see what I'm saying? For Berkeley.
Yeah.
And I was also able to attend an amazing camp in Connecticut called the Litchfield Jazz Camp,
Yeah.
where I met like Steve Wilson, great people like Don Braden,
Yeah.
and some others, So and Dave Santoro, who was our harmony teacher. So by the time I got to Berkeley, I was, you know, I felt at least, like I understood what was going on. I was aware of sort of everything. I felt like I had a jump start. And through Berkeley, I met we call him one of the modern jazz heroes by the name of Hal Crook. He's a hero. And so in his whole concept of jazz improvisation, beyond time and changes, being accountable for your lines and not just playing to, regurgitate, but sort of like telling a story, creativity, you see what I'm saying? All those things. I felt like that prepared me for the Thelonious Monk Institute, because the Thelonious Monk Institute, which was, I guess, formerly known, now it's called the Herbie Hancock Institute.
Yeah.
Terrence Blanchard was our artistic director, and that was sort of like that direction. The approach was sort of like the extension of the music. So the
Yeah.
languages of the lone of not only but Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter. It seemed like it was that kind of school,
Right.
creativity, going for it, letting go. These are some of the things that we would always hear.
Yeah, the
Mr.
concepts.
Blanchard,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the concept. So I think that's where
Mm-hmm.
the concept started, where you can only be you. Everyone else is taken.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it allowed us to kind of explore composition,
Mm-hmm.
to really get our acts together musically for 2 years. See what I'm
Nice.
saying?
Yeah.
So those experiences prepared me, I feel like, for the real world and also for my journey too. So
Right.
I'm absolutely grateful for them and grateful for the guys that I got to play with along the way too.
Right.
And I
Right.
don't know
Right.
if you know this, but the Monk Institute, they select a band.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of get to develop with that band. So I was fortunate to, develop with Billy Buss, Victor Gould, Ogie
Oh,
Wong, Nick Falk, and Matt Morantz. Matt Morantz, he's amazing
man,
saxophonist.
I
Ridiculous.
I didn't know that Billy Buss was part of of that
Yeah,
year.
he
Man,
was.
I
Yeah.
absolutely love his playing, man.
Yeah, Billy's amazing. Yeah. So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
we all developed our concepts, to get like we hear each other, we
yeah.
understood. And I remember like whenever we were frustrated with someone, we'd just write the hardest part for that person. Like, oh yeah, you wanna act up. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay, fine.
Oh
Read
my
this,
God, that's too funny.
read that. So it was, and the thing is, the amazing thing, I think they changed the guidelines because it ended up where we all came from Berkeley except for Matt Morantz,
Oh,
and we knew each other, so it was sort of like a family.
right.
I hung out with Victor. We practiced together
Hmm.
for the audition. You know what I'm saying? So it was like
Yeah,
an amazing experience that
that's amazing,
again
man.
prepared us.
So you've had a pretty interesting journey from when you started to play the saxophone and moving back to Haiti from Connecticut, then moving back to the US, having
Right,
a lot great mentors from
right,
in your mid teens, moving on
hmm
to study at two of the most prestigious music institutions in the world, really. Um,
right.
and how has all of those experiences helped to shape um, your direction? Or in other words, what are you in pursuit of? I'd like us to really discover what your ground is. And the title of this podcast is Keep Taking Ground. I'm trying to encourage and
Right,
inspire
right.
people to keep taking ground in their individual, personal, and creative journey. So let's discover what are you in pursuit of, Godwin?
Right. So throughout my studies and all those different institutions,
Hmm.
I was always reminded of my foundation and
Okay.
who I am, which
Okay.
is, someone of African descent
Hmm.
via, the Caribbean.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying? An
Yeah.
American of African descent
Hmm.
with Caribbean parents.
Right.
So I would say when I was in grad school in the Monk Institute, it all started coming to me, this pursuit of sort of being me, because that was the concept in the Thelonious Monk Institute. And I
Hmm.
realized that I had something really special, my background
Right.
and the connection to the island. You see what I'm saying? So I
Hmm.
began to also realize that when it comes to jazz or Black American music, there tend to be this hierarchy,
Mm.
that unless you're in pursuit of the language of Louis Armstrong or Bird or Bebop, the '60s, Monk, all my idols,
Hmm.
that's it. That's it. And to me, I always felt like there's more. There's more. A lot of jazz musicians in general always feel like they're superior. I've been fortunate for instance to do pop gigs
Hmm.
where the horn section they'll be like what we call a traditional jazzer that will feel superior because they can play bebop, and that language call for something else.
Yes.
And if you're really in the present,
Yeah.
you'll be able to express. and kind of still deal with your personal musical history and language over that atmosphere, that musical atmosphere. You see what I'm saying?
Definitely. Yeah.
So I always felt that like hierarchy. You understand what I'm saying? Like it's
Definitely.
always there. Like,
Yeah.
okay, unless you can play bebop, then you can't play. Unless you can do this, you can't. So I started exploring more. Of course, that's my foundation, as someone that grew up in America. But I started looking more into like ancestry and the connections, to jazz and the sounds of New Orleans via the Caribbean. And I went further, personally tracking along my DNA and
Wow.
my African ancestry to kind of find this global connection in terms of, I realized that modern music, 21st century music in particular, deals with the African diaspora.
Right.
So the African diaspora culture is now global. Literally
Yeah.
everywhere you go, it's like whether you listen to trap, hip hop, jazz, pop, it
Afrobeat.
all came Afrobeat exactly. It all the roots is
Yeah.
Africa via the Caribbean.
Yeah.
The beginning of hip hop,
Yep.
the English
Trinidad.
Caribbean.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like in the Bronx, my I remember having this conversation with family members recently last year. So last year for my CD release, I went on a little journey with my mother to the Bronx to where we lived. And I noticed that that neighborhood is still very much Caribbean, like all
Right.
and that was kind of like the breaking ground for hip hop. You see what I'm saying? So there's a serious connection. We're a lot more connected than we think.
Definitely.
And I realized that if we're aware of those connections, the music will, have higher grounds and we'll be able to take it to other places.
And you
So
could
that's sort of been my
transcend
journey.
that traditional American conception about what's legitimate in jazz and in music.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's
And so, like a lot of the heroes in this music have ancestry, from outside of the US, but they still had the same experience. For instance, in hip hop, for example, Notorious B.I.G. was a first generation Jamaican,
right.
but his influence is still what it is. You see what I'm saying? He's still in the Hall of Fame, one of the greats of all time, the GOAT, as the young generation say. You see what I'm saying? And so were a lot of, musicians. So were, someone like Horace Silver from Cabo Verde, from Cape Verde, still, still put his stamp on this music.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So the connection is there. And so are many musicians have, Caribbean roots or directly connected with the continent.
I mean, I connect with that idea so much, and I definitely think that you have been one of the main proponents of our generation, my generation of saxophone players that have been a really clear and inspiring voice, bringing, finding the roots of the music and discovering the ancestral DNA of the music, really, and bringing it to us. So I want to go back to that idea of ancestral DNA, because I know with your debut album and you're continually writing and discovering stuff, but your compositional process involved a lot of research.
Absolutely, yeah.
What was that process like?
Well, again, it started with, like I said, 10 years ago. It actually started with living in New Orleans and seeing like that Creole connection, particularly to Haiti. And I said, man, this is something I really want to explore. It kind of introduced me to possibilities that are open for exploration.
Right.
Open my eyes, to new ways. And through that, I was able to kind of like go back to the continent, trace my DNA,
Wow.
specifically to certain places. And the common denominator that I noticed was speech. Like a lot
Mm.
of times, I remember specifically being in Mali, and
Yeah.
a lot of times I would understand particularly the time. I'm like, is this odd reader? They're like, no, it's the text. We're going based on the text.
Right.
And then I saw that connection with the church music that I grew up listening to in Haiti. You
Wow.
see what I'm saying? That the
Yeah.
idea of text, your arrangement being based on a text, and
Hmm.
your rhythm, your clave, and everything else, and from there you can add whatever else. And, so just all those things. So it's to me it's very interesting because through it, not only I enhance my skills as a composer and arranger, but I
Hmm.
also understand my DNA better, and I
Mm.
understand who I am and the connection and all these things. You see what I'm saying?
That's really really cool. Um, how so going back to this idea of transcending the traditional conception and
Mm-hmm.
finding DNA. How have you used all of your travels with this with your global project and your study to inform the pursuit of transcending that traditional conception of what's legitimate in
Right,
American
right, right.
jazz? You talked about the idea of using text. Is there
Mm-hmm.
something from your album that you could use to demonstrate how you incorporated those
Demonstrate.
things?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So this one will be probably on my next album. I haven't
Okay.
recorded it yet,
Okay.
although we explored it once before in New York
Okay.
with an amazing singer by the name of Pauline Jean.
Hmm.
But we haven't really delved into it. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So I'm working on the arrangement
Hmm.
during this quarantine season
Yeah.
to really get it out. So in the church, right, we have a lot of different songs that are just like basic words, like so just simple text, sort of
Hmm.
like from the countryside.
And
For
in
example,
Haiti?
yeah, in Haiti.
Okay.
So one in particular, it goes le ma pa la pa pam pa pam rilim pam. So le ma pa la pa pam pa pam rilim pam, which is 11, or we can get 9 out of it, which is le ma pa la pa pam rilim pam le ma pa la pa
Mm.
pam rilim pam, rotating, so 9 and
Yep.
11. So we
Yep.
can
Yep.
do le ma pa la pa pam pa pam rilim pam le ma pa la pa pam pa pam rilim pam le ma pa la pa pam rilim pam le ma pa la pa. And all that means is like when I'm speaking to the Father, meaning God, our Creator,
Hmm.
He's mine.
Mm. That's the translation.
The translation. But I think because of like my quest and linguistic quest also,
Hmm.
and because the I'm still fascinated by the Creole language. I speak it
Me
and I'm
too.
able to also look at it. You see what I'm saying? Look at
Yeah.
it like that sounds weird, but it's funky.
It is
And we
so
can
good,
create
man.
something out of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with this concept, your arrangement is kind of like set. You see
Mm.
what I'm saying? Because you
Yeah.
can change it around like let ma pa la pam 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 really pam let ma pa la pam 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 really pam let ma pa la pam 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 really pam takita taka tiki
Mm.
tiki tiki toko tiki 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 toko tiki tiki. You see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
my foundation. So I build a lot of like what's called Chihoya. So I used to be in this band called the Eagle Orchestra. I would say that was like my introduction to exploring African sounds in my DNA. It's a large ensemble out of Boston. Shout out to the great Russ Gershon. And that was
Mm.
sort of like my introduction to like Ethiopian jazz through it. I was able to play
Hmm.
with the father of Ethio jazz. His name is Mulatu Astakte. He was the
Hmm.
first African to
Yeah.
study at Berkeley. And so I learned a lot, all these different modes called Anchihoye that the Ethiopians use.
Hmm.
Interestingly, it's also found in Togo.
Okay.
like and Fwe culture, or what we know as Ewe culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that connection because Ethiopia is all the way east
Mm-hmm.
and Togo is west, and you found that in their traditional music. So I incorporate a lot of those modes
Mm-hmm.
also as like my quintus firme for improvisation.
Yeah.
And then I just let like my foundation and what I hear naturally
Mm-hmm.
take over a concept like that. So like like that kind of like
Mm-hmm.
conceptual thing.
Yeah, there's obviously a really strong rhythmic element
Absolutely.
to it, and you're using the text and the language, the phrasing to shape that, and you have a whole new palette of sound and rhythm conception that you're
Exactly.
that you're introducing into the music. And in saying introducing is probably not the best way to say it, because it's really not an extra layer, but it's a foundational layer in terms of the roots of the
Exactly.
music.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So
Wow.
yeah, and so in addition to that, not only as a composition device,
Mm-hmm.
but when I was in New Orleans, I was fortunate to study composition with the great Roger Dickerson.
Mm-hmm.
He was suggested to me by Terrence Blanchard because he
Okay.
was Terrence's teacher to Wynton and all those
Mm-hmm.
guys. And during our lessons, so we studied counterpoint, non-stylistic counterpoint for two
Wow.
years. And I thank him for a lot of it. And what was amazing from Roger Dickerson was every concept we explored compositionally, he always figured out a way for me to incorporate it in my improvisation. So it wasn't only about composition. So a lot of
Right.
times we'll do certain things, I'll bring him like, my quintus firme, free species, second, third species, or whatever it was. And he'll play it and say like, see, you can use these devices when you're improvising too.
Mm.
You should think of it like when you're playing. And I said, wow. So a lot of it I incorporate into my playing in terms of like the rhythm, the motive, suspension, delayed
Yeah.
anticipation. So I'm always like conscious of
Yeah.
my of my atmosphere, if you understand what I'm saying, as an
I
improviser, because it's an atmosphere
mm-hmm.
that we're planting in and we're sowing seed and we're creating sounds, we're welcoming people. And sometimes we have to question people like, hey, listen, you
Mm-hmm.
must do, but improvising is an atmosphere. You
Wow.
see what I'm saying? So a lot of times we're questioning people like, hey, man, I didn't like what you did here. But man, thank you very much for this. But sometimes we're sad, we're happy. You see what I'm saying?
And
So
so
like
that's like
all
the
those
emotic
concepts,
element.
exactly. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
exists in improvisation. And you see what I'm saying? If you're looking at it like that, it transcends bebop, free jazz, all of that. It's global. The
Wow.
possibilities. You understand what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
transcends as the great Hal Crook would say, time and changes.
And so this pursuit has really uh, shaped not only your creative conception, not only your compositional process, but also your improvisational concepts
Mm-hmm.
and approach as well. And it's, I mean, hearing you explain it is so interesting because I've listened to the global album and had the pleasure of hearing you play live a couple of times. And I can definitely hear all of that in your playing. It comes through
Mm-hmm.
in your playing so clearly, and it's really good to hear the backstory and see how all of that has really become part of your musical DNA and through
Yeah,
finding the
absolutely.
ancestry.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of layers to it, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's for me it's continual. Right now I'm really interested in Central Africa, specifically the Congo region. So I was fortunate to visit that region in January.
Okay.
And because to me, that's sort of like our inception as Africans in the New World. We know that majority of us came from there,
Yeah.
through the French to the Portuguese. So we know that, whether you're from the lower Antilles or upper Antilles or the States, the South,
Yeah.
Congo Square, a lot of that, or, so I feel like, and the other thing I realize is that a lot of people explore Africa, but it's always kind of sort of West Africa. And not many get to go to that terrain because it's francophone. Not only that, and we don't really have access, to there. I mean, to get a visa to go to the Congo,
Right.
man, it was a journey. I remember, waking my sister up, like we lived together and like, sis, my gosh, like, pray for me to get this visa because we got, and it
Yeah.
was like a celebration, when they finally gave me that visa.
I think you posted
And
about that, right?
yeah, I
Yeah, I
posted
remember
about that
that.
because it was like so hard to get. And so, and that and that trip was amazing. One of the best trips of my life, And I realized that wow, that the connection is there. The Americas were so much Congo and Central Africa, so much more. I hear that influence, the duple the tresillo, the clave rhythm, the tresillo, that they call that the Bakongo rhythm. And that's a
Oh,
tribe. That's a tribe in Central Africa that's currently present in Angola, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the Republic of Congo.
I
So
didn't
like
know
that
that. Wow.
eastern region. And so I played them one of my songs there, Seawell. And for it's pretty much this thing. And he's like, oh, that's the Bakongo rhythm. And I said, wow, that's interesting. Us home in Haiti, it's a kata, or other places it's a clave, whatever, but that's like attributed to the Bakongo tribe,
Right.
so like,
Godwin, it's so interesting talking about all of this with you because I think when I think about present day musicians in, let's say, in the Caribbean, here you are of Caribbean heritage or African heritage via the Caribbean. You're finding and discovering your ancestral DNA through music. But I think also for me, as someone who grew up in the Caribbean, there's a lot of that DNA that I'm also trying to discover because I think there's also a need for it. In the English-speaking Caribbean in particular, I don't think we've been as successful as, let's say, the French-speaking or Spanish-speaking Caribbean in preserving some of that musical
absolutely,
DNA. And so, I
absolutely,
heard you playing that Bar Congo rhythm, and it sounds exactly like what we would call dub.
right,
That rhythm, and
yeah,
making that connection, and then going deeper into the ancestry, it enriches your understanding of your own heritage, and I think
absolutely,
inevitably the listener can hear like the depth of
right,
that tradition.
right.
And it's so important for musicians to dig deeper. And thank you so much for sharing all of that
Oh,
insight
thank you. Yeah,
on your process. Um,
yeah.
I'd love to do one more thing before we wrap up this conversation.
Oh, cool, man. Yeah.
I want us to do a rapid fire question game that I call 3, 2, 1. So I'd like you to share 3 albums that have been influential for you, 2 saxophone players, and then finally leave our audience with 1 piece of advice.
Okay, great. Uh-huh. So when do I go now?
Go for it.
Okay, so Bird with Strings, for
Amazing.
sure. One of all-time favorite. Fell in love with Charlie Parker. The Shape of Jazz to Come, Ornette Coleman. I mean, when I first heard that album, I feel like it changed my life. And to me, Ornette sounds like he's from the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Like how someone from the Caribbean that heard bird would translate it. You know, to me that sounds like something, you know, like la la music. You know, it's so yeah, definitely that. Third album, let's see. Man, gotta add this in there. Gospel According to Jazz. Kirk Whalum. You know, I grew up in the church.
Dude, that was a huge album for me too.
And that was a huge influence, you know, of me. I've still, you know, explored hymns in my concept. And a lot of it, you know, a lot of my music is exploring, you know, the music of, you know, the spirituality of, you know, the church. And that album kind of changed my life, you know, and he's such an amazing player. His sound. The special thing about Kirk Whalum is like the guy plays one note.
And it's over.
And you hear so many characters, stories, and I mean, whenever I hear him play, I see so like it's pictorial, each note.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely say that.
Wow.
2 saxophone players. Whew. Man, I would have to go with Bird and Ornette.
Okay.
You know, because I feel like, and I got a chance to meet Ornette too, hung out with him.
Wow.
He knew a great buddy of mine. And so Kazimir Libeski is his name, great piano player, Belgian cat. And he invited me over, and I have a little clip. Sometimes I post part of it. It's like 5 minutes long. Like every other year, I'll post like 15 seconds of it, you know, because I wanted to do something with it. And he was amazing, man. He told us so many amazing stories, and he's literally one of my heroes, you know. I feel like in my playing, you hear the bird and the Ornette.
Definitely.
And the African and the Caribbean and the church. If I were to describe my playing, you will hear all of that.
Definitely.
And I did go through like a heavy Lee Konitz period too. If you listen closely, you hear that. And I got to meet him too. You know, bless his soul, he just passed away. But so I guess those will be my 2 tied. I'll add the great Lee Konitz.
Yeah. Cool.
And then what was the third thing?
One piece of advice.
Man, one piece of advice that I would stress to all the saxophone players out there, or just anyone in general, is to absolutely be yourself. You know, when it comes to this music, when it comes to exploring, because think about this, the reason why you like your favorite saxophonist is because they're completely themselves.
Yeah.
The reason why we love Charlie Parker is because it's unique. The reason why we love John Coltrane is because he was 100% him. You know, the reason why we love all these people is because of that. So I always encourage cats to whatever you hear, that's it. You know, don't let the mob dictate like, okay, this is the end sound, this is the out sound. There's no such thing. We don't even know what's in or out until we put it out. You know, until it's in the eye of the beholder. What's in and out. It's, you know, so that's what I would say. Just do what you hear, explore it, go for it, share it with us, build your audience based on that. You know, people will relate to your truth and your journey.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great advice, man. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you and just hearing your journey from when you started playing and your current global project and all the work that's gone into that, and something that I really connect to in terms of discovering ancestral DNA. So thanks for all the insights on that. If you're listening and you want to connect with Godwin, his website is godwinlouis.com. godwinlouis.com. You on Instagram too, right, Godwin?
I am. Yeah, it's Godwin Louis, but Loue on Instagram.
Cool.
And I'm also on Facebook. I think my Facebook is full though. It's been full for like the past 10 years, and I'm trying to switch it to an artist page.
Right.
I don't know how to. So
I can show you how to do that.
Like really? So like switch all my because I want to switch it all to an artist page.
Yeah, I can show you how to do that. So
Amazing.
thanks for listening, guys. I hope that this episode was both inspirational and it empowers you to keep taking ground in your individual journeys, your professional, your creative, your musical journeys. So thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks, Godwin.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. Congrats again. Peace out to everyone.